Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. I'm Jeremiah Waylon, and he's Roger Parks. And you may be wondering, I really hurt myself. I'm injured. What do I need to do, and when can I get back? Now, I'm not really injured, Roger, okay? Let's be clear, first of all. This stems from a question we received on YouTube where this person proposed that they were pressing, and then they got hurt and set back and then actually had an injury, and now they want to know how to come back. So we figured we would address this for any and all injuries. So it's not just specific to your shoulders or whatever. This is specific to us. Roger, speaking of us, how are you?
I'm fine. You ask me that
Perfect.
Every time. I'm going to have a better answer one time.
I know. No, I think people like your answers.
Okay.
Because there's definitely somebody out there that's like, this fucking guy in the green shirt is talking a lot, and Roger just gives you the straight dope. All right.
Yes.
Set this up, brother. What do we do you want to get straight into the topics, or you want to put a little context on this per usual?
I think we need to frame it, because I don't know that what you said is not wrong, but I don't know that it's not misleading.
Okay. Maybe it was the internet.
we're not gonna help you figure out your injuries. We're not gonna tell you what to do if you get injured. We're gonna talk about the idea of returning to activity after an injury. And injury may not even be the right word. You know, sometimes I guess we should talk about this first. We'll do that in a minute. You know, when we say injury, what do we mean? You know, do I have an ache or pain? If you have an injury, let's say you have a tear, a break, a sprain, a strain, something that's diagnosed, this is a different category. This is not really what we're talking about. If that's what's going on, that's going to be between you and your doctor. And we're going to give you some suggestions, if you do have that, how to ease back in to your training. That we will do. So we're not trying to give you advice on how to handle injuries. We're going to talk about some anecdotal things. We're going to talk about some non-specific things that we've gotten from being coaches for a very long time. So this will unfold a little bit, but if you're looking for specific guidance, you should know by now you're not going to get that from us.
unless hiring us.
It's irresponsible. It just is. So what we are talking about, though, is this specific case. This comment specifically asked, and you can go and read it. It's on the last podcast. It's the only comment because no one else comments.
Come on, everybody! Don't make Roger feel so sad about that. Put a comment.
But he wanted to know what are the questions he should be asking about returning to pressing. And that's really what we're after today is how do you navigate some of this stuff and when do we get back? But first, this idea, I have pain. Does pain mean injury? Mm-hmm. And I think we should start there. What do you think?
Pain does not necessarily mean injury, although there are people that will, or maybe have been told that this pain could be an injury. And I'm not saying that you're like a weakling or anything, but pain happens when you're moving heavy things and or doing something for a long duration.
Doing something new?
Something new even more so. You know, like the old classic, I just learned how to kettlebell swing and now I can't quite sit down on the toilet properly. You know, that's just pain. That's not really an injury.
Sure.
What about you, Roger?
Well, sometimes too, I sit on the toilet just fine. Thank you.
Okay, good. Now we can all rest easy.
Sometimes pain is actually a part of rehab, and that's beyond our scope. We're not going to go there, but the idea of pain, we just want to frame this a bit. Pain does not mean injury. It doesn't necessarily mean stop. It does mean modify. It does mean observe. If you're feeling pain, you shouldn't ignore it. That's a bad idea. That's a stupid thing. That's just an unmitigated stupid thing. There's no way around that. If you don't have context behind it, even if you do, pain is a signal and you should listen to it. Okay. So if you think train through it, you're a dum-dum and you can stop watching because I don't want to talk to you. So let's throw that out there. But let's say you have pain in your shoulder. Do you automatically go to the doctor? I'm never going to tell someone to not go to the doctor. But what I am going to say is that has ramifications. So I've been coaching for a long time and worked with a lot of people. And if I can isolate one thing only that determines whether or not people get back to exercising effectively if they make a full recovery rather than, hey, I can never do these things again. It is outlook. It is 100%. This is a no-brainer. This is the most important thing I've ever seen, regardless of what's going on. It is someone's mentality, because I have clients who, if they feel something, they're ready to go to the doctor. These people limit themselves. They don't get as good results. They get in their own way constantly. They're always out, overthinking things. And if there is an injury, the time to take to get back to some sort of normal activity takes a lot longer. Whereas other people, I can have one client in particular, she can come in missing a leg. How you doing? Oh, I'm good.
Other than that missing leg part.
Well, you had 2 legs last time I saw you. Yeah, I'm good. I still got this one. Let's go.
Yeah. The other one's in the car.
Now, that's not always the right way to be either, because people like that can neglect injuries. But what I do want to point out is it's not always a good idea to immediately jump into that paradigm, that position where you're going and you're seeing doctors, because doctors are going to tell you things that they don't understand. Doctors are really, really good at what they do. I don't think that they are good at knowing what they're not good at. Yeah. We could do an episode telling them, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to trash talk doctors. I think they're awesome. I think they're necessary. I think fitness doesn't appreciate them, but they do get some things wrong. They get out of their lane. They constantly are outside of their scope. I was just one of my clients just the other day asked me not to call her doctor, who was prescribing exercise, which this doctor didn't know how to do. Most doctors don't, because they're not trained in it. Anyhow,
yeah.
Doctors will sometimes tell you things that are not true. Never do this again.
Yeah. Never deadlift again because your back's going to blow out.
Sure. And that's, I don't know if I share, I think you know this story, but Coach Susie, that was, when years ago when we first met, training at the gym, that was her scenario that she had. I had just, she had blown a disc. We didn't really know each other all that well. She was kind of new to the staff and, still kind of getting to know her. And she had been, looking around and trying to figure out who was who and what was what. And she blew out a disc. And I think it was something simple like walking a dog. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, yeah, you should never squat or deadlift again. And that was horrible advice. She asked me, she said, what do you think? I said, I think that's monumentally stupid. I've been watching you work out. You don't know how to use your hips. She was using her back for everything. I think exactly what you need is to learn how to squat and to deadlift and to learn how to do it properly, because then you can use the muscles you're supposed to be using. And I think your pain will go away. And this is, I don't know, a decade later. I don't know how long it's been.
It's really been at least a decade. Okay.
It's been a long time. And, she's swinging 40 kilo bells.
Yeah.
And, does she have an ache or a pain every now and then? Sure. We all do. But she hasn't had a ruptured disc. She hasn't had any of the stuff that the doctor said was going to happen. And that's because she's gotten stronger and she's learned how to move better. So sometimes you go to the doctor and you get that bad advice. So this is not medical advice. This is when you go and you deal with this stuff. One, if you're going to go to a doctor, be prepared to be told that there's something wrong with you, because that's what
sort of
do.
Their business.
That is their business.
And let's not get it twisted.
The really good ones will tell you, and I've met several good ones, you do not treat a scan, you treat a patient. Mm-hmm. I also know of some bad ones. I've known of, 3 or 4 who have recommended surgery without pain because the scans look bad. That does happen. These are things that I was personally involved with, not clients at the time, but this happened before, I met them. But regardless, you have to be careful about that. When you get into that, you're going to be told that something is wrong with you. And then you need to decide, can you handle knowing that you have a partial tear in something? Because sometimes when you know there's a problem, you
work it all up
pain
in your head.
Yeah. And you're afraid to move. But many doctors will tell you, depending upon the situation, that a partial tear is better in many cases, from my understanding. A partial tear that you rehab properly is better than getting something reattached or getting surgery. Those ligaments can be pretty strong. So, there's a sweet spot there, and you really need to think about that. You need to consider your personality. So we're going to shift, and we're going to talk about the idea of if you've had an injury that is diagnosed, something that you're working through, continue to work through it. One of the first things that I see about readiness is people doing incomplete rehab. And by incomplete rehab, I mean no rehab.
Yeah, that's sort of like the quick thing. I went to PT and I did it three times and it feels fine. I guess I feel better. I'm getting better. I actually have witnessed this more often than not, Roger. And then what? And then a few months later, the same thing pops back up again because you didn't accept the fact that these people know how to treat this so that you can move well. And,
sure.
The vanity aspect of it is null.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't do the rehab, or they don't do it long enough, or they do it until they get out of pain. And in spite of knowing some good PTs who tell people, hey, this should be your daily routine. This is your tendency. The interesting thing with injuries, I'm given to understand that the biggest predictor of injury is previous injury. Mm. Because not in every case, you're going to have some freaky things that are going to happen. Maybe you're at a baseball game and you get slammed in the skull with a baseball. That's not the same as, I'm a runner and I tend to hurt my knee in this place. Well, you're hurting your knee in this place, not just because of the way you run, but because of the way you are built, and your habits, your anatomical tendencies, all these things add up to the likelihood that you have a weak point in the system at one point, or you're likely to move too far in one direction. And you have to acknowledge these tendencies. So if you have a shoulder injury, you have to acknowledge that you are prone to shoulder injuries for one reason or another. And you can't just assume, oh, I'm all better now, let me get back to pressing. There was something wrong in the first place. It is possible, let's say, that there was too much volume, or not enough recovery, or too much loading. But either way, that was maybe before the injury. Now you've got an injury. Now it's likely to pop back up. So there's a reason it happened, and you have to address that. So when when rehab people say, hey, do these exercises, you should keep doing them. Some of them no, but many of them, yes. Even something as simple as hanging for some people is good to, keep their shoulders nice and healthy, knowing that they have a tendency to get a little dinged up there. So often when people go through the process and they want to know, hey, should I get back to work? Well, did you actually go through the rehab? Did you do what you were supposed to do? And are you still doing the exercises? That's a big question to ask.
Is there a certain point, I guess, the PT would tell you, all right, you're done, and then you can sort of move away from sticking in those exercises? Or is it sort of in perpetuity?
Well, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the PT, and it's going to depend on the injury. For some, it's like, I don't need you to do this exercise all the time. But, for people, let's say, who are prone to back pain or knee pain, like, hey, I'd like you to do something to keep your hips in order. And maybe they're not PT exercises.
Yeah. Maybe mobility, something or other, or something like that.
It might be mobility. It might even just be like, hey, you should do squats. Just keep that up. Don't stop moving.
Yeah. That's it. And your arms, everything will stop and like sort of stiffen up if you don't use it, right? Use it or lose it. So that's, that's one of the things, we want to talk about. Have you gone through the process? And when, are you really ready to get back? Are you really ready to get back to it? I think something else we should talk about is, let's say you don't necessarily have an injury, but you have pain. What do you do? Well, you sort of know what I do sometimes. Like, I injured my back fairly well. I don't know.
Hold on. Let's do the Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay.
let's do the part of. Let's do the no. You're both.
Oh, okay.
Because I've seen you deal with injuries. Let's be honest with folks, so they understand. We're prone to the same shenanigans. So what are the two ways that you've handled injuries, and how they differ, and how's the outcome different?
All right, so I'll use the back injury as the most, I guess, the most important one. The shoulder injury is something we'll talk about another time. It's too long. But I injured my back having tried a new technique in a deadlift, and I felt the injury, and I decided, or I felt the pain. Let me just say pain. I skipped it, not skip to injury, but I felt the pain, and I said, in some stupid ass way, I was like, I'll finish the other 4 reps I need to do because that's my set. And that turned out to be a really bad idea. Okay. That was a really bad idea. And over the course of, I would say, a couple of years, this injury sort of persisted. It would come, it would go. I would think it's gone. And then I would be like, Roger, let's do it. Oh, you got a new 52 kilo bell? Let's swing it. I'm down for this, and I think this is great. And ultimately, as I went through this cycle of, I hurt myself, I'll use a spiky mat, I'll use a TENS machine, I'll try and stretch it, I'll rest it, I'll hurt myself, I'll never see a doctor, I hurt myself, it feels better, I hurt myself until one day I did something profound, Roger. I decided to move with my legs, okay? Instead of driving things with my back. And I'm a professional, folks, but sometimes, and I think most times, professional needs professional help. Luckily, I have a buddy who happens to know his thing too about a thing or two, and we figured out, if you just use your legs, then you won't be lifting through your back. And subsequently, I have not had any of these injuries return, and I do not even think about them. I never think about, my back hurts. I never think about, if I do this, I'm going to hurt my back. I just think, if I do this right, this is going to be a swell time. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, well, it is, and it's I've witnessed you. So I'll do the other side. So that was the bad reaction to injury that ultimately had a good outcome. But I've seen you more recently when you've had any issues, you've learned to back off. Mm-hmm. You've learned to modify. You've learned to study. You've learned to figure out what are some ways around this in order to keep training, where maybe you don't use the thing, but you're still active. Your lower body's dinged up, you'll do a little more upper body for a couple of days, vice versa. And that has been the switch that I think is has been pretty big, because I've witnessed this guy. He doesn't want to quit. He wants to do what he wants to do. And if he sees me doing something, he wants to do it, whether he's ready to do it or not.
I'm always your huckleberry.
So, many good things come from that type of personality, but some bad things too. So yeah. I think one of the things that I really want to highlight is the idea that you can, in many cases, just modify something. If let's say we'll stick with the shoulder. Let's say your shoulder's hurting. You can still work out. You can still get some blood flow in the joint, but you don't necessarily need to do the thing that's bothering you. If you're like, presses hurt my shoulder, let me keep pressing. That's not a good idea. You could switch into squats. Especially with a goblet hold. Are you working your shoulders? Not really, but a little bit. You're getting some blood in there. You're giving them a chance to recover and rest. And the question is, does it hurt? If it doesn't hurt, then you can keep doing that. Keep an eye on the pain. Does the pain go away on its own? Because often it does, with a little bit of rest. And then, you can do some investigating. You can do a little mobility work, whatever. Now, if that pain doesn't go away no matter what, or if it's too severe, then you should see a doctor. But sometimes leaving it alone is really a fantastic remedy. So, you want to start when you have these first signals, you want to think, what's the right thing to do? Should I go forward and ignore it? No, that's not the answer, unless you have specific, let's say you're working with a PT who says, hey, you're going to do this exercise or the stretch. It's going to hurt a little bit. Yeah. And they might say something like, I want you to understand what your baseline of pain is. As long as it goes back to that baseline or a little bit better within a couple of days, you're good. Either way, unless you have specific instructions, don't ignore pain. But sometimes you can modify. And that is just give the thing a little bit of rest and then come back after it. Then you can ask a series of questions about your training. Well, what caused this in the first place? Because it's a huge clue. You're a detective. Pain is a big clue. You don't want to ignore that. So why are you having pain in the first place? Something's not right. So we can talk about what some of those reasons are.
Yeah. Also, just a reminder, when you are going through pain or you've had to have some time off from the pain, don't train where you were, train where you're at now. And that's like a huge thing. Even count this in when you come back from like a significant layoff for whatever reason. Maybe you were on vacation or whatever. Don't think you got to get right back to it. So if you're in pain, and I like that, being a detective, of course, everything, you need to be able to figure things out for yourself. Otherwise, you're helpless. You're a baby, what do they call it? A baby deer in search for its mother. So you want to figure out what actually failed you. What are some possible causes, Roger, that people can begin to question so they can start to do this work for themselves?
Well, one of the first things and this goes back to that press video. That was, I believe, the second question is, are you ready to do this? Is your body prepared? You have to start at some point your body's preparedness. And that could be a basic matter of mobility. It could be building up some strength in the muscles and the tendons at a lower load or with a lower volume. But you do need to ask that question. Is this anatomical? There are some cases when injuries are recurring and you've had some problems and you can't seem to shake it. You might just have a particular way your bones have grown. Maybe your structure, there may be something that you just have very little space. For example, that's what they call subacromial space. You've got there's a particular point in your shoulder where you've got some important stuff that holds everything together, and it goes under this little groove, this space. And if it's narrow, just congenitally, anatomically, this is how you were born, then you may need to significantly lower the volume or load because you just don't have the ability to handle this stuff. There's not much you can do about this stuff. Almost like your ability to squat or deadlift. Now, in many cases, if you go slow, you can get tissue stronger, but most people aren't really good at that. So you do want to address the anatomy. You want to say, okay, if it's a press, can I get my arm over my head? If you can't get your arm over your head, there's a reason, and you should probably investigate what that reason is. Now, if you can't get your arm over your head, should you keep pressing? There are different opinions. I have mine. What do you think? What do you usually tell people?
Well, are we talking you press up and your arm's like 2 feet in front of your face, or it's not just perfectly aligned with your ear or something like that?
Well, the first thing you did is you asked a question for context, and that's a very important point. Like, are we talking it's not perfect? Or are we talking about like you can't even scratch your own ear? You can't get your arm that high.
Like, if you can't get your arm that high, you can't even scratch your own ear, then that certainly, in my eyes, might require some additional support, because that's sort of either it's a structural thing or there is like a tear or something that's really holding you back. If it's not perfect, I found more often than not, if we just keep the load kind of light and begin to gradually work these positions, especially on a press with a kettlebell, I've seen mobility increase. And without having to do like crazy, like, I guess I don't want to even generalize them as PT exercises, but like corrective type exercises,
Sure.
Without having to be like wall angeling this and, lots of things that are helpful, and I wouldn't not use them. But if it's not necessary, I sort of just like, let's let the work it and let's see what happens. And this is, of course, funny thing is, we were talking about this with one of my clients this morning. I was talking with him, and we talked about the little tiny bells that he had used, and he was so concerned about shoulder injuries. And this guy, he's a tennis player, and he needs these shoulders to be able to do these things. And over the course of years, we've gotten to points where he is snatching 24s, no problem, multiple reps, 100 in a session, no problem. And these things all came just from primarily doing the exercise itself in a controlled manner and with awareness of what's going on. Simply learning how your body can move and should move in certain areas. Because there are, like, with the press, since we're on it, if you check the last episode, the 5 questions you did ask, we talked about where you could wedge, where you could do these technique things, and those are helpful to kind of help bypass things that might be causing a limitation. So that's where I go with that.
Sure. And I'm prone to do the same thing. If I have a client who's really willing to do the work and they're like, what, I really like to clean up my range of motion. Cool. Let's do that. Mm-hmm. I have other clients who they won't do the work. I know they won't do the work. And I want them to be as strong in the ranges that they have as possible. And I know that sometimes when you keep doing the same thing, even if your mechanics aren't ideal, they improve. So, there are some people who are going to say, well, that's always wrong. And you're going to come up, when I first started as a trainer, the big thing was micro trauma. You're going to get micro trauma. Like, oh no.
Yeah, it sounds like my childhood.
That's terrible. You don't want that micro trauma. And look, the idea is kind of compelling, but the idea goes, if you don't do this exercise exactly the way I think you should do this exercise. Let me say that again. Not the right way, but the way I think you should do it. Okay. Yeah. I came from a time when, knees couldn't go over the toes and all that stuff. If you don't do the exercise the way I think you should do the exercise, you're going to get micro trauma. And I can't tell you when, but eventually you're going to have an injury. And you might see this person, 10 years later, hey, how's your shoulder? Oh, it feels better than ever. Well, it's going to happen. Just you wait. You're going to get that injury. When you do, you're going to think about me.
That's fear mongering, man.
It is.
You sound like the news, bro.
It is. And, it's not, it's not the case a lot of the time. I've seen it again, there's this big struggle right now between the anecdotal, hey, boots on the ground, I've been there, I'm the one doing the work in the gym, and this is reality, versus the evidence-based science, this science, that. And there's kind of a big rift between these ideas. And I think they actually should go together. But the reality is that both approaches have severe limitations. And I've seen personally enough instances where mobility is improved without doing mobility drills. When, you get the, mobility before stability, like, nope. And like, I can easily think of a dozen times when I needed to load something up and get someone strong, and then the mobility improved. Not always, but either way, we don't want to get into this idea of it's got to be absolutely perfect, but it should be largely pain-free. If your goal, in a snatch session is enduring it rather than learning or enjoying it, look, you might have a little bit of pain. We got beat up in the beginning. It is kind of a normal thing. Not saying I recommend it, but it does happen. You shouldn't be enduring your workouts. You should be getting stronger from them. So if everyone is an exercise and what's going to hurt today, you are doing something wrong.
Yeah. You want to be able to come back and do these again. Like, and the even if you are enduring something and then you're like, I could still come back and do it, eventually it's going to catch up with you. And what are you going to do from there? Who knows? There's not much you can do. One of the things you could think about when it comes to this sort of working through things, a great starting point is usually technique. Have a technique focused base where you're, okay, I'm not going to overload myself with reps. I'm going to make sure these reps are quality and see how these go. And use the video, for crying out loud, folks. Use this video because these are helpful to teach you what's going on with your movement. So if let's say you did a jerk or something, and then you're like, oh, this hurts my knees. Well, why did it hurt your knees? Let's look at the video and see what happened. And now you're working technique. And oftentimes to work that technique, it's going to be a lighter load. Usually I would suggest a lighter load anyways. I wouldn't say like, nothing, but something sub what you're maybe at a 50% of your maximum or something like that. What'd you think?
And these numbers, these numbers, a lot of things we're going to say, a lot of what everybody says, these are just random numbers. These are not bad starting points. So there's nothing specific about 50%. There's nothing specific, the number might be 45, it might be 70. Who knows?
How does it feel?
Exactly right. And that's the thing that we really want to stress is this is a process. That's why the information we give you is not as specific as in other places, because the information that most other people, when they are specific, it is wrong.
Or it's just for them. It only applies to them.
Sure. Or maybe it applies to 30% of people, but there are more people to whom it does not apply. And that is a problem. So, the technique is something that I've personally, that's usually my first stop. Okay. If I'm not dealing with debilitating pain with myself or with a client, first question is, can I do the exercise without pain? So let's go back to the Coach Susie story.
Okay.
You know, when one of the big things that I wanted to figure out was, can I have her squat and deadlift without pain? And, you know, it was very slow. It was unloaded, but sure enough, it didn't take very long.
So
this was part of Coach Susie's rehab. This very process. Can we get you to squat and deadlift without pain? When she did it wrong, she felt it in her back. There's the big clue. That's what we were paying attention to. Could we find a way to get her to squat pain-free? Now, it didn't happen right away. There are some things, if I recall correctly, we did, you know, some quadruped work, some shift backs. Let's teach you where the hip joints are and how to use them in a non-threatening way. And then let's stand you up, right? And now let's have you do this in a slightly harder way, but still what we focused on is technique. Once we got the technique down and we could move without pain, then we could increase the load. Then we could increase the volume. And then, you know, the rest is what it is.
Yeah, it just comes together. And if you follow that simple process, chances are you'll find your way. Now, one thing that we find to be very important, and you've mentioned this on more episodes than this one we're about to share, and I think this is key, especially with kettlebells, and I guess a lot of ballistic type movements or plyometric things, is this idea of tissue tolerance. So can you explain like what that is and what people can look for to, I guess, develop that for themselves?
I mean, loading in at reasonable volumes or reasonable, you know, use a little bit of common sense when you're doing things. You know, when tissue doesn't just adapt overnight, you need to send a stimulus. You need to have, you know, sufficient nutrition. You need to have sufficient recovery. Things get better. They build up over time. It doesn't happen right away. Now, you might have a nice neurological benefit where you feel much stronger. And this happens very frequently. You know, someone goes into the gym and, you know, they hit a new PR. Like, oh, I hit 135 on the bench today. That's my new weight. Like, it's not your new weight, dum-dum. You know, that is
today.
think of, well, it's a PR. It doesn't mean that's what you're going to put on the bench every time. Oh, I did 1 today, I'm going to do 2 next time. Probably not. Maybe, but probably not. And if you keep doing that, you're gonna hit a wall. Think of this idea of the load you use, or the volume, or the distance, whatever it happens to be. Think of a pyramid, and a pyramid has an area that's contained, you know, or triangle, whatever you want. The tip of the pyramid is the hardest thing you can do, and most people are always leading with the tip. Okay. Hey. They're always, they're always thinking, you know, oh, this is the hardest thing I could do. This is the weight I use now. No, you hit 135. Most of your, most of your set should be done with 110, 115, whatever. Right. This is the hardest thing you can do. So if you're looking at this triangle, the hardest thing you can do is the tip. You want to move in closer to the center. Right? Maybe you can stay toward the top, but you don't want to be right at the tip. So people overdo it, and they don't give the tissue long enough to build up. So the idea of tissue tolerance, which does take time, you know, you can look at, you know, muscles are going to take anywhere between 4 and I think 16 weeks, depending. I've seen lots of different numbers in order to actually, you know, get some muscle mass. Connective tissue takes much longer. In many cases, months. So you want to go slowly and give that time to build up, rather than just going and saying, you know, oh, I did, you know, my goal is to run a marathon. So, have you been running? No. Okay. Can you run a mile? Don't think so. You run a mile. Oh, I'm going to run 2. What percentage increase? If you just ran your first mile and now you're going to run 2, what percentage increase is that?
That's 100%, Roger.
That's a big increase, but people don't think about it like that. They don't think, okay, well, let's try that again and see how it feels. Let me stay here. You're still getting a training benefit. When you think about that idea of the triangle, wherever you are within the triangle, you're getting a training benefit, whether you're at the top or you're at the bottom. Now, if you stay near the top, you're going to get a specific type of training benefit up to a point. But if you're always doing that PR, if you're always pushing, you're pushing yourself out of the ability or the place where you're able to adapt.
Yeah, and specifically with running, and this is, I guess, with everything. If you can't accept the fact that sometimes let me rephrase it. If you can't accept the fact that too much, too soon, too often is going to lead you to a bad path, and if you can't accept that it's okay to work out or train with a little bit slower, more gradual increase and still get effects, then you've probably chosen a goal that's a little too lofty for the time frame you may have chosen it in, or you're not ready, or you have something psychologically messed up with you and you want like 90 days to everything. And that's just not reality. The goal with kettlebells and with movement in general is to have sustainability for a lifelong achievement, to be able to do this forever as long as you possibly can, especially so that when you're older, you're not going to be laid up and hindered, because when you are stuck and you can't move because okay, pro athletes aside, they do wild things. Those are different people. I think we've talked about that before. So if you're a pro athlete, okay, you've got different coaches telling you to do different things. You're paid millions of dollars, so you'll be okay, hobbling to your appointment when you're 70. But regular people might not be.
So, the idea of allowing for tissue tolerance is modest increases. Sometimes people think, when it comes to stuff like cardio, it's like, oh, my lungs aren't good, but they're getting better. Like, okay, well, your lungs are carried around by your legs, and you still need to respect the beating that your legs are taking and the connective tissue is taking. You need to let that recover. There's no way around that. And people forget that. So, when we're done looking at what went wrong, we've cleared the anatomy piece. Now we've got our solid technique. Now we need to talk about the variables. It's the intensity piece. What load did I use? What volume did I use? Sets, reps, all of that stuff. And that's where we want to start conservatively, and we want to build back up. So the answer to the question is, when can I start doing that again? When you're not feeling pain. And, figure out if it's anatomy, figure out if it's technique. If it's not either of those things, then start slowly, and then build up from there, rather than, you're pressing and, hey, I can only do, a 12 kilo bell, but I did it today and it felt fine. That doesn't mean jump right to a 16. That means stick with the 12 and do more volume, or do more reps. And one of the things that you can think about is a 10% rule. So pick one thing, and there are more things, but for most people, you're going to manipulate one of three things in order to increase the stimulus or the intensity. You're going to increase load, you're going to increase, or you're going to increase volume. And volume consists of sets and reps. So you can add a little bit of load, you can add a set, you can add reps, whatever it is, but what you're adding should not be more than a 10% change. And adding a set in the beginning would be more than a 10% in terms of, increase of your total volume. So you don't want to do that necessarily. But the idea is you want to pick one thing and add 10% to that, not more. If you constantly feel like, I don't feel this, there's no stimulation at all, then of course, you're not in the right spot. Maybe you started too conservatively. When you start to get up to big numbers, let's say, you're a power lifter, your normal PR is 800 pounds and you start off with 135. Sure, you should do that for a couple workouts and see. But if you just don't feel anything at all, then you might have started too conservatively, and you do need to, actually tax the tissue a little bit. So, find a spot where things are a little challenging. Just remember, like Jeremiah said, it doesn't matter where you were, it matters where you are. And I deal with this constantly. It's like, why don't you put some weight on there? Because you can't handle the weight that's on there now. But I used to be able to do this. I used to have hair. Like, who cares?
Can I get a pic?
Deal with the reality in front of you, right? Lift the weight that's on the bar, and then I'll give you more.
And I think one other thing that people can consider in respect to all that is, are you approaching things strictly as an outcome-based sort of thing, or are you approaching it as a process-based sort of thing? Particularly with, coming back from an injury or you're something like that. If you focus just on the process of it all, as opposed to like, I have to get back to these 100 swings a day because I need that for this challenge. Or if you're like, hey, I can do 10 swings today. And if I do 10 swings for 10 days, that's my 100 swings and that's pain free. And I increase by 10%. I will likely be able to continue to go. And then, at least in my experience, when I've taken this approach, particularly with running, is where it came in. And there's a big thing with running. Everybody like always goes too much, too fast, too hard. It's just what happens. It's why they created the run walk program sort of thing or technique, because people would just blow themselves up and then you're injured. And then you're like, it's notorious in the running community. I'm not going to get into it any further than that. It's probably the same for CrossFit. But except 10%. And even if it's like, if you ran that mile and now you get to run 1.10 miles, great. You did it. Now be okay with that and be okay. Like, I was able to train today, as opposed to, oh man, I didn't get 2 miles today because my partner Jeff got 2 miles and now, I'm behind. Give it up. Be you. Be yourself.
Damn it, Jeff.
Fucking Jeffs, man. What is it with Jeffs? I'm just kidding. This was actually, ironically, I think this question came from a Jeff. We love Jeffs. All right. Some of my best friends are Jeffs. Anyways, what about this? Go ahead.
No. What idea?
I was going to say, what about using regressions instead of rest? So we're not talking about intra-workout rest. We're talking about resting from movement, period. Is that what you're talking about?
No. So like, let's just keep with the Coach Susie thing, because this is the thing that actually happened. Like, I told you the goal when we started moving, when she was cleared, right? She's okay to start moving. The idea was to, let's see if we can, my hypothesis, good technique eliminates pain, makes her stronger. Was she ready to do that? No, because the old habits were too ingrained. So I couldn't just do a squat because she wanted to move too much through her spine. Okay. So let's get her in a quadruped position and teach her a rock back, which if you really look at that quadruped position, hands and knees, you are similar to a squat position and you're learning how to shift through the hips. Is that tissue taking a ton of load? No, but it is a very regressed version of what I was trying to do to teach her an important lesson. Then once we did that, then I could have her do shallow body weight squats, but the technique needed to click. So using regressions can be basically it's just using an easier version of the thing that caused a problem. Now with a lot of kettlebell skills, that can be a difficult thing to do. But let's say, you're trying to get the shoulders to move with a tiny bit of load, but not a kettlebell. You can do some positions kind of like that rock back position where the arms are kind of overhead and you're pushing yourself back. And, let's say you start off quadruped, and as you push, your arms relative to your torso are moving in that overhead position. And you do have a little bit of load on the joint. So that could be considered a regression. Maybe you do partial range, maybe you use a machine, maybe you use a dumbbell.
What did you say?
The dumbbell it's a less complicated tool that doesn't have rotation, and maybe that does the trick. There are a lot of things you can do, but the idea is regressions often allow you to train in a graded way, and you still expose yourself to the stimulus you need, but it's much more manageable.
All right, so we've managed our regressions. So we've put ourselves in a position where the load is less, where we're starting to build more range of motion, or maybe you're not building range of motion, but you're confident in your abilities to make this move properly.
Uh-huh.
What how can we rebuild to the place where we once were? Do you have any sort of like little framework we could use that's, I know not a specific answer, but things to consider, and so you can sort of be like, okay, I went through this helped, this is where I should focus next?
No, not anything different than we did an episode on programming, and that's what I would do. I would wait until I'm pain free. I would wait until I've gotten to the point where I've kind of answered these big three questions. Is one, is this an anatomical or a mobility restriction? And have I cleared that up? Have I fixed my technique? And have I worked through my loading to a lesser degree, to a point where I will have allowed for soft tissue adaptation? And you can just Google how long this stuff takes. So
Google it.
You should be working this stuff for at least a month or so, and then you start to follow a normal progression. With a percentage of, let's say, a new rep max. So once you feel like everything's ready to go, you're going to start slowly going up toward whatever your rep max was and get a baseline. So you have a subjective baseline, or an objective baseline rather. And then you have your subjective baseline. How does that feel? So let's say you used to be able to press 40 kilos, but you got an injury and now you can only press 20. 20 is your new PR, right? You're doing it without pain. It's hard, but I can do it and it doesn't hurt. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go back and you're going to just work your percentages, and you're going to stick with your rep ranges that are going to be effective. And then you work your way back up. It doesn't change. That's the thing. There's some other psychological stuff that you'll need to go through to make sure that you're not scared to move. But other than that, nothing really changes. Once it's ready to go, it's ready to go. And you'll go through the process the same way as before, but you will now have some newfound information on what your limiting factor might be. If you maybe did too much volume before, you'll need to go a little slower. Or maybe you didn't warm up properly. This might sound like a really simple thing, but a lot of injuries, in my experience, can be avoided with just a little bit of warm up. And I have clients all the time who've been training with me for years complaining about warming up, but they don't do it. They get hurt. It's like, well, you work out on your own, you hurt yourself. You work out with me, I make you warm up and you feel better. Like, what's the...
Yeah. Well, I think is it this idea that I've only got an hour to work out. I've got to cram as much crap into this hour to make my progress. And it doesn't have to be like a crazy ass warm up. I mean, it's warm up for what you need. Are you warmed? Are you feeling strong? Are you feeling engaged? Are you able to create tension when you need tension? Are you able to get the leg drive when you need a little bit of leg drive? I don't use a ton of stuff, but I have particular check-ins, and we've talked about this a lot. We're a big fan of mace movements. Like, I find that the mace, that particular implement helps me understand, are my shoulders feeling good? Okay, maybe I'll do some squats. Maybe I'll do some side lunges. I'll hit these 360s. Okay, everything's feeling all right. And I also like crawling patterns. I think you're a fan of these, Roger. This is like good for if you have said shoulder injuries too. You're building stability there, and the crawling brings a lot of things on. I will sometimes incorporate some very rudimentary animal flow type movements into a warm up. And then when I move to the actual thing I'm trying to do, I have more confidence in it, and I can now put forth an effort that's, I guess, I don't want to say respectable, but that's maybe more in line with what I'm looking for as somebody who's patient with my training, as opposed to, I only have an hour, I got to cram this in. So, and there's actually other factors in my life that are keeping me from getting the results I seek. It's not the fact that I warmed up in my exercise session. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I do think that that mentality is what gets people in the way. They feel like they're behind. Mm-hmm. And I should have worked out 4 days this week, but I'm only working out 2. Now something hurts, I can't stop. It's just not the way. If you consistency beats everything else when it comes to getting stronger. So figure out a way to work out less time. That's fine. Then, do a warm up, get ready to go, do fewer sets. Even if you don't have time for a workout, show up and do your warm up. But a lot of people feel like, oh, I haven't worked out all month, I better do this. And then they jump right in where they were and they expect like, oh, I used to be able to do this. What's wrong? Rep number 3 hurts and they still do the last 7 and then they're out for another 6 to 8 months.
I told you that's not the way to go. I know from experience. Don't do that stuff. All right. And, it's very simple. What do you think, Roger, about, okay, so a lot of people frame their entire training life around 7 days, Monday through Sunday. What about expanding your training week to a 10-day sort of week?
Nope. It has to be 7.
It has to be 7?
It has to be, yes.
I understand. I understand.
Of course.
Right.
Of course. Expand your calendar.
Yeah. The reality is nobody's looking over your shoulder for crying out loud. Unless if you have a goal, let's say you want to do a certification, then reverse engineer it and say, oh, give myself a little bit of room, hire somebody who can help you understand a time frame that would work and allow you adequate preparation for a peaking phase that happens there. And that's real stuff. That is real training methodology. But if it's, I'm coming back from injury, you can put that thing even into the next year. Who cares? And if it pops up sooner, great. But I, for one, know when I'm in pain, I'm kind of a dick. I have an underlying anger happening because I can't do the things I want to do. And it's not like I'm raging out, but I'm not super happy. And I'm normally a pretty happy person. So I try to avoid the pain. And in order to do that, I've said, oh, I kind of feel crummy today. Maybe I'll just take the day off and go for that walk and feel all right. And because I know if I do that tomorrow, my chances of being better and being able to put a full session in increases dramatically.
Yep.
And that's really it. So the real goal, Roger, is to what?
In this case is to be able to move without pain.
Move without pain. Don't destroy yourself. Keep working. Keep adjusting the level for where you're at. Because pain is, this isn't Roadhouse. I've been dying to use this quote, Roger. You knew it was coming. Sam Elliott says, pain don't hurt, but pain does hurt sometimes. But it's like the mental aspect to it. So train to stimulate, not destroy. You're not going to be stronger by being wrecked. This, I think, is one of Roger's favorites is don't make emotional decisions. I sometimes struggle with this, but I feel like I've gotten better. I've gotten better with patience in that regard. I think a lot of emotional decisions come from a lack of patience and wanting to see this end result. But when you're injured, you're never going to get that end result. So it's like, figure it out, okay? So that might mean going slower, making better choices, because if you can't lift, you can't get bigger muscles.
Try finding somebody in your life to tell you that you're being stupid, because that's often helpful.
Well, Roger, let's do a little thing right here. Yeah, let's do a little experiment right here. So mark this spot in the podcast if you're listening to this. Roger, I want you to say you're doing something stupid in your best Roger way, and go.
No, I can't. Come on, you can't put me on the spot that way. This is an art form.
Okay, to tell somebody they're doing something stupid.
Yes. It's again, with everything else, it's highly context dependent.
Got it. All right. Well,
am I doing this right? Well, if you want to do it wrong, you're doing it exactly right. Like there's so many variations.
Yeah, that's good. I've heard a lot of them.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah, that's something. Show me that again.
Remember my favorite way to praise. That was a lot less bad.
Yeah, that I do like that. That's put that on a t-shirt. That was a lot less bad. All right. Anything else for this particular thing, Roger?
No, I think that, that gives people something to think about. Ultimately it's, create some, take some responsibility over your movement. And those three big steps to getting back, figure out if it is your anatomy or some sort of gross mobility restriction that will not improve just by moving. Because if that's the case and you keep doing it, this is going to keep happening. Refine the technique and then load gradually. It is not that it's not that complicated. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's just not all that complicated. And then once you've given yourself adequate time for tissue adaptation, then you can start going back to business as usual. But business as usual is not how you did it before, especially if what you did before is why you got hurt. Business as usual is those are the things we're talking about with programming. If I were to say that the number one mistake that most people make, it's with the amount that they do. You know, I've seen people do bad exercises for a long, long time, and if they don't do too many of them, they still show up and do them in the gym the next day or the next week. It's the volume, it's the load. These are the things that really get people hurt. It's like, oh, I was tired, but I did another set, or hey, I felt it on this rep, but I kept going. It's the not knowing when to quit,
ignoring signs. Yeah,
that's what gets people. So pay attention. You didn't last time, do it this time.
Hey, you don't got to be a freaking hero every time, you know? It's sustainability, all right?
Don't be stupid.
Don't be stupid. All right, well, that's about it on that. Be sure to download the Bells app, okay? Do it, enjoy it, and there are some warm-up things in there, so you can warm yourself up through our sessions. And then like and subscribe. My God, you're already here, and if you made it this far, surely you've liked and subscribed, because that helps us. Stay strong.